What's up, Misters? It's the Russian dude. In Russia's never-ending circus of absurdity, propaganda has managed to turn a pipe, yes, a literal gas pipeline, into both a national shrine and a death trap. Welcome to long-forgotten Operation Stream, also known as Operation Pipe, Операция Труба, one of the most bizarre and cruel recruitment spectacles in recent history. Yes, it happened back in March, and the Russian propaganda milked the most of it all the way until mid-May, but approximately a month ago the narrative changed completely. Heroes became nobodies, sacrifices were forgotten, and the whole operation turned from life-changing mission to just ordinary objective, just ordinary mission. If you haven't heard of forgotten about what this Operation Pipe was destined to achieve, it's basically that Russian soldiers were ordered to crawl 16 kilometers inside a narrow underground pipeline to surprise Ukrainian forces appearing behind the front lines in Kursk region. That's right, such a complex objective on the territory of the Russian Federation. Probably that was one of the reasons why it had to be forgotten as soon as possible. But anyways, Moscow presented it as a daring military innovation, then went on to build monuments, write songs, and televise documentaries about the heroic pipe. There was even one show on Channel 1 right after the victory parade on May 9th, and well, I guess as soon as the parade was over, many people just switched the channels. And I mean, you cannot make this up. An actual pipe became a celebrity, while the soldiers who suffocated inside were discarded like garbage. Months later, we now learn about the devastation. Permanent lung damage, pulmonary diseases, soldiers collapsing after walking barely 100 meters, widows denied compensation, and hospitals dismissing chemical burns as acute bronchitis or even more humiliating common cold. And yet, instead of outrage, Russians just forgot this operation even existed, just like the propaganda wanted them to. It tried so hard to make it look like an epic adventure similar to legendary tales of Greek demigods. But when it saw that people barely cared, or even never cared at all, so did the propaganda abandon soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice. So today, let's talk about what Operation Pipe truly reveals. A regime obsessed with glorifying objects instead of people, willing to sacrifice thousands for theatrical symbolism, and determined to silence even its own loyal propagandists who dare to mention the human cost. Let's dive into how this disaster became both a monument to propaganda and a tomb for these Russian soldiers. When the story first broke, Kremlin media treated it like a holy revelation. Imagine this: men crawling like rats through 16-kilometer metal tube filled with gas residue, methane and chemical particles, and the state sells it as the boldest military plan since the Second World War. The operation's insanity was overshadowed by its theatrics. Documentaries praised the courage of pipe warriors, exhibitions popped up across Russian cities, even the smallest towns, and even Yekaterinburg built a symbolic crawl-through pipe for kids and adults near the Church of All Saints, where, you just once again cannot make this up, the place where Romanovs were executed. Pretty symbolic, right? Of all the places. Looks like in Putin's Russia, history and horror must always just hold hands together. And it did not stop there. A monument was also erected in Kursk. Yes, to the pipe itself, not the soldiers who crawled through it, but to the pipe. Then pop singer Victoria Tsyganova debuted a patriotic anthem literally called Pipe, warning Ukrainians twice that Russia would come after you from beneath the ground. In Russian, word pipe, which is truba, it can also mean doom, a dark double meaning too grotesque to be coincidental. Citizens were invited to crawl through a short replica of pipes for fun as well, as though this were a children's festival or a McDonald's playground, not a humiliating reenactment of men inhaling poison until their lungs failed. This obsession with turning a pipe into a sacred relic highlights the regime's twisted priorities. In the Russian propaganda machine, objects such as bridges, tanks, nukes, and, well, now apparently a gas pipeline, this is what becomes holy icons. But human beings? Disposable, forgotten, erased. If you died inside the pipe, well, tough luck. Sorry, comrade. You don't get your name on the monument. The metal tube does. Because that's all that matters. Symbols. But sometimes even the regime's most loyal propagandists malfunction when they can no longer keep up with the absurdity of narratives they are forced to spread. Let's talk about one such interesting case in our next chapter. Enter Anastasia Kashevarova, one of the regime's favorite propagandists. Normally she is just another cog in Slavyov's factory of ridiculousness, host, blogger, founder of the pro-war Women's Front, but unlike most propaganda stars, Kashevarov's husband is actually fighting at the front lines. Maybe fighting. This does make a huge difference still. This personal involvement has made her less careful and occasionally dangerously honest. When Operation Pipe veterans started collapsing with destroyed lungs, it was Kashevarova who sounded the alarm. She wrote about the combatants diagnosed with bronchitis who were later found with lung cancer, pulmonary embolism, or simply suffocated to death. Soldiers came back barely able to walk 100 meters without passing out, suffering constant headaches, blackouts, and agonizing pain. Some died, yet their families were denied payouts because their condition was not considered a combat injury. And I mean, just think about it for a minute. Being ordered by your military commanders to crawl through a methane-filled gas tube during a military operation is somehow not classified as combat activity to be eligible for these death or injury payouts. But surprisingly, Kashevarov's outrage did not stop there. She documented how soldiers on crutches or wearing Lazarov fixators were sent back to battles. She exposed how generals denied responsibility, saying, "It was not me who sent you guy there," while pocketing bribes and leaving corpses rotting for months. She revealed that widows collected payouts only by remarrying new soldiers, turning grief into humiliating survival strategy. And yet here is the tragic comedy. Kashevarova does not question the war itself. For her, the problem is just bad paperwork, faulty regulations, or just a little bit of bureaucratic sloppiness. In her mind, fixing the forms will magically turn mass deaths into productive victory. She is standing almost like in a burning house, pointing out at the curtains that survived but are wrinkled, and thus just insisting that once they're ironed and put back together, everything will be fine. That is the level of denial we're dealing with. And if you think about it, that's probably the level of denial that is allowed by the Kremlin itself. Because if there is no denial at all, at least the slightest one, to balance out the unconditional support for the war, things will get too suspicious too fast. Now let's briefly talk how the Russian propaganda in general did everything possible to turn these soldiers into nobodies in a record short time. The story gained so much traction that even state TV could not ignore it. For a brief moment, viewers saw a glimpse of the truth. Doctors admitted Operation Pipe left men with mysterious lung conditions no medical literature had ever described before. Pipe syndrome, as it came to be called, combining petroleum poisoning, chemical burns, and infectious pneumonia. Soldiers lost 10 kilos in a week, gasping for breath, their lungs corroded by the very infrastructure they crawled through. But no manual existed, so military doctors improvising treated them like literal lab rats. And as always, reality was quickly spun into propaganda fairy tale. Instead of focusing on the nearly 1,000 soldiers involved, coverage narrowed on a single unit. And guess which one? Make your bets in the comments. Our familiar friends and professional filmmakers from Akhmat, the Chechen Special Forces. Their commander Aptial Laudinov was paraded on Channel 1, declaring that every trooper would be cured thanks to secret treatment from Russia, obviously, not from the West. State TV called doctors heroes for making scientific discoveries breakthrough ones. The operation was framed as a brilliant military innovation to inspire future generations and make soldiers on the front lines think that their conditions could have been way worse, so they should be thankful for just sitting in the knee-deep freezing water-filled trenches, listening to drones buzzing around instead of crawling through these narrow pipes. What about the payouts then? What about the widows, the soldiers suffocating, the ones still deployed despite crippling disabilities? Silent, not a whisper. Instead, the narrative became about medical breakthroughs, national pride, and how a pipe had taught Russia new ways of war. The men who actually crawled inside it disappeared into background noise, into nothingness. They were not individuals anymore. They were props consumed by the cult of the pipe. People die, but symbols do not. That is why the propaganda was not able to afford making symbols out of living people. Operation Pipe is not just a militaristic PR stunt, it is a window into how Putin's regime views its own people. Soldiers are no longer fighters, their resources expendable and infinitely replaceable. Even compensation, the last illusion of fairness, is now stripped away. In 2022 and 23, some families at least received payouts large enough to buy houses or cars. Today, bonuses are trapped in paperwork, stolen by officers, or denied altogether in the very first place. Many soldiers actually pay their commanders to avoid being sent into meat assaults. We spoke about this many times before, reversing the flow of money completely. Families are now sending cash to the front lines to keep their loved ones alive. I mean, imagine that. Debt collectors knocking on your door because your husband had to bribe his officer not to die, and well, he died, but well, the payment is still due. Meanwhile, the army disguises active duty soldiers as deserters to avoid paying salaries. Hospitals classify chemical poisoning as common cold to deny compensation. Men with destroyed lungs are forced back into the combat. Even trench foot syndrome is not recognized as a war injury anymore. In Putin's Russia, not only are you disposable, but your suffering does not even qualify as real. And this cruelty carries consequences. Every soldier forced back to the trenches with a broken body, every widow denied compensation, every family crushed by the debt plants the seed of rage. The regime thinks it can silence them with bureaucracy, and it has been successfully doing so for a while, unfortunately. But hundreds of thousands of men will not stay silent forever. Veterans returning, crippled, betrayed, robbed, may become, hopefully will become, the most dangerous demographic for the Kremlin. Not liberals, not dissidents, not exiled journalists, not opposition, but the very men the system exploited, discarded, and left to rot. For now, the regime hides behind monuments, songs, and secret treatments. But monuments do not breathe, songs do not heal, secret treatments do not erase betrayal, even if they even exist in the first place. And when the war ends, it will not be opposition activists asking the toughest questions. It will be the men who crawled inside the pipe, suffocated, and somehow mysteriously survived. The Kremlin can keep erecting monuments to pipes, write pop songs, and broadcast fairy tales, but it cannot erase the stench of betrayal that clings to every soldier's family. One day, the men who lived through this farce will come home, and when they do, they will not be singing songs about pipes. They will be demanding answers, which Kremlin will not have. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support our work and help us stay independent, you can find some useful links down below, for example, PayPal donations. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.